Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm John M. Hawkins. The show is called My Strategy. We're coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. Well, very good to be here. Glad that you're able to join us as well. My Strategy radio show's focuses on personal development, and we're live on Saturdays at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. Today, we're going to be talking about stress management. Stress can occur any place and at any time. Too much stress can be toxic, but the right amount can make you stronger. And the key is to find the right balance. Learn how to manage your stress sweet spot. Well, again, very happy to be here with you today. Saturday is the day of the week that I choose to reflect on my personal development strategy and what happened over the prior week, and also start thinking about what I can be focusing on in the coming week. I think about what I've accomplished and also those plans, but keep in mind that any time is a good time for you to assess your personal development strategy. You don't have to wait till Saturdays. And that's what we do here on the My Strategy radio show. Now, our show continues to grow. We're available on iHeart, iTunes, Player FM, YouTube, SoundCloud, Spreaker, and many more digital platforms. So if you'd like to listen to this episode in a podcast format, you can go there. Or you can find any one of the other episodes out there on those platforms. And just like anything in life, we need to have a strategy and a plan to help us reach our goals, because even the best laid plans don't always work. This week, I'm looking for stories that you might have on stress management. What is some good tips or tricks that you might have? Send them to talk@johnmhawkins.com. That's talk@johnmhawkins.com. Or if you would like something else covered in the show, let us know as well. All right, so today we're going to be talking about stress management. Talk about symptoms of stress and how they can occur at any time and any place and how it affects all of us. Many of us see it as negative, but some of us see stress as a positive. Now, too much stress can be toxic, but it can make us stronger, especially with early experiences of trauma that can disrupt our brain responses. So we're going to talk a little bit about how that affects us and what we can do to mitigate any of those early trauma responses. I'm going to talk a little bit about how stress can be good for us. There's a study with 174 Navy SEALs that found that stress helped the SEALs obtain faster obstacle times. Interesting study there. We're going to talk a little bit about we're going to talk about the effect of chronic stress. Too little stress can lead to boredom and depression, but just the right mixture is what we're trying to find, and that's figuring out what our stress sweet spot is. All right, so we're going to start off with an article here by Jennifer Casarella. She says, stress affects all of us. You may notice symptoms of stress when disciplining your children, during busy times of work, when managing your finances, or when coping with a challenging relationship. Stress is everywhere, and while a little stress is okay, some stress is actually beneficial. She says, too much stress can wear you down, make you sick, both mentally and physically. She says the first step to controlling stress is to know the symptoms of stress. But recognizing stress symptoms can be a lot harder than you might think. Most of us are so used to being stressed, we often don't know we are stressed until we are at the breaking point. It says, what is stress? Well, stress is the body's reaction to harmful situations. Whether they're real or perceived, whether you feel threatened, or when you feel threatened, a chemical reaction occurs in your body that allows you to act in a way to prevent injury. This reaction, she says, is known as the fight or flight, or the stress response. During the stress response, your heart rate increases, breathing quickens, muscles tighten, and blood pressure rises. You're ready to act. This is how your body protects itself. Now, stress means different things to many different people, according to Jennifer. What causes stress in one person may be of little or no concern to another. Some are better able to handle stress than others. And not all stress is bad. In fact, in small doses, she says, stress can help you accomplish tasks and prevent you from getting hurt. For example, stress is what gets you to slam on the brakes to avoid hitting the car in front of you. Now, that's a good thing, isn't it? She says our bodies are designed for small doses of stress, but we're not equipped to handle long-term chronic stress without ill consequences. And that's kind of the theme for today, is that this short-term acute stress is good for us. It can help us grow, but when our body's not given the opportunity to refresh itself, to rest, to be away from stress, and we have a chronic stress or something that's long-term, that is when we end up with ill consequences. So the key from a personal development perspective is trying to identify what are those acute stressors, what are the chronic stressors, and try and figure out a way to balance the two. She says there's different types of stress. There's emotional stress, where you can become easily agitated, frustrated, and moody. You might feel overwhelmed, like you're losing control or need to take control, having difficulty relaxing and quieting your mind, feeling bad about yourself, low self-esteem, loneliness, worthlessness, depression, avoiding others. That's the emotional symptoms, according to Jennifer. The physical symptoms include low energy, headaches, upset stomach, including diarrhea, constipation, and nausea, aches, pains, intense muscles, chest pains, rapid heartbeat, insomnia, frequent colds, infections, nervousness, shaking, ringing in the air, dry mouth, clenching jaw, and many more. There's also behavioral symptoms, such as changes in appetite, not eating enough or eating too much, procrastinating, avoiding responsibilities, using drugs, alcohol, exhibiting more nervous behaviors such as nail biting, fidgeting, pacing. What are the consequences of this long-term stress? There's also cognitive symptoms of stress, which include constant worrying, racing thoughts, forgetfulness disorder, inability to judge, poor judgment, being pessimistic, or seeing only the negative side. When going through the physical, the cognitive, the behavioral, the emotional, I can tell you that if those are the symptoms, I know what my diagnosis is. I have had stress in my life, and you might too. Most likely you do. And so the key for us today is to really try and figure out and become aware of what are some of these stressors. Be aware of those habits that we have in place that might be helping us deal with these different types of stresses. And when we start to be aware of them and start to consciously figure out and prioritize which habits do we want to decrease, which are the new habits that we should put in place, what is a good level of stress, and how do we come down from that stress, that's when we're going to be in the best position to be able to manage our stress. You're listening to My Strategy. I'm your host, John M. Hawkins. When we come back, we're going to talk about too much stress is toxic, but it can make us stronger. We'll be right back. Hello and welcome back, everyone. I'm John M. Hawkins. The show is called My Strategy. We're coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. On the My Strategy radio show, we focus on personal development. This week, we're focusing on stress management. Right before the break, we were talking about some of the symptoms of stress and how they can occur any place and any time. We talked about some of the different types, the emotional, physical, cognitive, and behavioral stressors. And learned a little bit about what those symptoms are. All right, in this segment, I want to talk about how too much stress is toxic. But guess what? There's good news. A little bit of stress can actually make you stronger. And I think the key is for us to figure out and unlock the mystery of this and find a way to be able to make stress work for us, not us always being managed by stress. Got an article here by Devin Fry. Talks about why some stress is good for you. Starts off by saying research shows that early experiences of trauma can disrupt the brain's stress response, affecting the amygdala, the brain's alarm system, the hippocampus, the verbal memory center, and the prefrontal cortex, which is the CEO of the brain and a stress regulator. It says these changes make people with too much early trauma more chemically reactive to stress in general as a teenager or adult. It's as if these early negative experiences feed our reactions to current stressors. I want to reflect on that for a bit. Many times we, and myself included, there's certain situations that come up, and I have a hard time processing them. And I know that I'm somebody who's data-driven and knows how to look at the facts, but there are certain topics, there are certain memories that come back, and I have a hard time processing them. And as we think about this I could be processing it negatively because of the way I handled stress or perhaps trauma as a young child. So you never know how the past is going to impact our future, but we want to be aware of this. And it's important to be aware, because if we're aware, we can then take the steps to try and fix the problem. It goes on to say, that being said, we all know some pretty successful and happy people who have experienced difficult childhoods, perhaps having an alcoholic parent, they were adopted, or losing a parent at a young age. This raises the question on whether experiencing some stress can actually make us tougher. Is stress good for us? Some researchers have suggested that exposure to moderate levels of stress you can master can actually make you stronger, better able to manage stress. It's like how a vaccine, which contains a tiny amount of a bug, can immunize you against getting the disease. Richard Dienstbier's 1989 theory of mental toughness suggests that experiencing some manageable stressors with recovery in between can make us more mentally and physically tough and less reactive to future stress. One possibility is such experiences lead us to view stressors as more manageable and we become more skillful at dealing with them. I think this is an important point here. Many times it is the experiences that we go through that help us and shape our personalities, that shape us as who we are, that give us confidence to be able to accomplish a small goal and then go after a big one. But the key here is that if you are in chronic stress, long-term stress, you never get the ability to recover. And if you never recover and just have constant stress, those stressors in life, those chronic stressors, will debilitate you. They can cause physical problems, mental and emotional issues, behavioral issues. So we, as we are developing our personal development strategy, need to be aware and need to look to our past and figure out if any of those types of traumas are affecting us today. So some studies by Professor Siri and other colleagues at UCLA seem to bear this out. They followed a natural sample of subjects for years, assessing how much stress they had experienced in their lives, their recent stressors, any mental health factors, and their overall life satisfaction. Researchers found that people with a history of some lifetime adversity reported better mental health and well-being outcomes than not only people with a high history of adversity, but also than people with no history of adversity at all. People with a lot of lifetime trauma had the worst mental and physical health, but those with a history of some, greater than 0, adverse life events were less distress, had less disability, fewer post-traumatic stress symptoms, higher life satisfaction over time than those with no negative life events. Importantly, who had experienced a bit of adversity were the least affected by recent stressful life events. The conclusion: in moderation, whatever does not kill us may indeed make us stronger. We go on to talk about some of the chronic patients. But was this just as a freak result that might have led with some particular study they used? It turns out that was not the case. The researchers found support for the benefits of a little adversity in a sample chronic lower back pain patients as well. Researchers studied 400 patients. And participants with the highest levels of adverse life events were the most sick and disabled. But there are also similar patterns to the previous study. In other words, those with some greater than 0 lifetime experience of adverse life events reported less disability and used the healthcare system less often than those with none. It's all about moderation, isn't it? All right, you're listening to My Strategy. I'm your host, John M. Hawkins, coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. When we come back, we're going to talk about how stress can be good for you. We'll be right back. Hello and welcome back, everyone. I'm John M. Hawkins. The show is called My Strategy. We're coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. Right before the break, we were talking about stress. Now, too much stress can be toxic, but can also make you stronger. I also talked about the early experiences of trauma and how that can disrupt our brain stress response. We need to be cognizant and aware of any early trauma that we might have faced, because that could be impacting how we handle and manage stress today. All right, in this segment, I want to talk a little bit about how a stressful mindset might be a good thing. We're going to talk a little bit about a study on Navy SEALs and what the impact was. All right. I have got an article here. This is actually a continuation of one of the ones we did in a prior segment. It says, benefits of believing stress is helpful. If you choose B for most of your answers, then you're likely to have a stress is helpful mindset. They're talking about choosing B on a test question. Those who believe stress is helpful are better able to use stress to improve their performance, health, and growth compared to those who believe stress is harmful. What's your mindset? Do you think stress is helpful or harmful? In a study of 174 Navy SEAL candidates, those candidates who believed stress was helpful had faster obstacle course times, were more highly rated by leaders and peers, and lasted in the program longer than those who believed stress was harmful. Think about that. What is your mindset on stress? Is stress positive? Is it a positive in your life, or is it negative? Article goes on to say people who believe stress is helpful shows better memory and performance on standardized tests. They also have fewer headaches and backaches, less insomnia and hypertension. Believe stress is helpful might even help you live longer. Those who believed stress was harmful and experienced a great deal of stress had almost 45% increase risk of premature death compared to those people who experience little stress and those who experience a lot of stress but believe stress was helpful. Now, those are for those who answered B. If you answered A on most questions, you likely have a stress is harmful mindset. This is interesting. I never really thought about it. The good news is that you now have the opportunity to improve your health, your performance, and growth by developing a stress is helpful mindset. While saying you should develop the stress is helpful belief is easy, it might actually be more challenging than you would think. Understanding how the stress response works and how it is impacted by your belief. You might be wondering how just believing stress is helpful can be good. To understand, first we need to understand how your stress response works. We covered a little bit of this in our first segment, but the author goes into it from a different angle. So stress is designed to help you. When our ancestors ran into a tiger, the stress response systems gave them the energy and focus to either attack and kill the tiger or run away. This is the fight or flight response, which was critical for survival, which is still important today when you need to respond to a threat or take on a specific challenge. When you perceive a challenge, your body automatically responds by going through a rapid sequence of change to increase your chance of success. Your body releases the stress hormones, adrenaline, epinephrine, and norepinephrine, and cortisol, which act as the messengers that signal the rest of your body to prepare for action. A whole chain of events happens. Energy sources like glucose, amino acids, and fatty acids rapidly mobilize from where they're stored to critical muscles. This helps you prime your body for action and keep your brain alert. Heart rate, blood pressure, breathing increases to the speed to transport nutrients and oxygen to your muscles and brain to help protect that body. At the same time, energy normally used for longer-term processes such as growth, digestion, and reproduction is diverted to the more immediate needs. Your muscles tense to provide your body with extra speed and strength. Your pupils dilate to sharpen your vision. And perspiration increases to prevent overheating from your increased metabolic rate. Your immune function also gets a boost of energy in anticipation of possible injury and infection. The article goes on. One thing that's interesting here is they said some tasks need a chainsaw approach while others need scissors. This is where we need to think about our responses. The author says, if your body is reacting as if a tiger is chasing you when you're helping your daughter with a difficult math homework assignment, you're not setting yourself up for success. The goal of this system is to supply energy where you need it, when you need it. Your beliefs about stress can help this process, or they can get in your way. If you believe stress is bad for you and should avoid it at all costs, or stress makes you weak, then you're likely associate the physical and psychological sensations that come with the stress results as harmful, which can undermine your body's reactions. I think it's important for us as we think about this to really assess how we are approaching everyday life stresses. Do you approach things as life or death, fight or flight when they come up? Some do. Some do. Is there chronic stressors in your life that are taking and zapping all of your energy? And I think as we start to put together our personal development strategy, we're going to need to look at our whole person, our physical, our emotional, our behavioral, our psychological health, and really start to look at those stressors as a positive, but also know that they could be negatives as well. Too much stress can cause physical damage, emotional damage. Early trauma can impact our ability to handle stress and the responses. And I think that if we want to get to a point where we see stress as being helpful, where we see stress as being able to get us to that next place in life that we are trying to go, we need to be able to come up with a strategic way, a course of actions to handle stress better in our lives. There's a certain amount of stress that we need. We need to seek that stress, allow ourselves to grow, but also know that it's not just being stressed out all the time that is going to get you to that next level, but it is important for us to have that stress and then allow ourselves to recover. And that is the trick. The trick is knowing when to allow ourselves to have that stress and what stress is good, but then be able to find a way to recover as well. You're listening to My Strategy. I'm your host, John M. Hawkins, coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. When we come back, we're going to talk about the key to stress management versus chronic stress. We'll be right back. Hello and welcome back, everyone. I'm John M. Hawkins. The show is My Strategy, show that focuses on personal development. Coming to you live weekly, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern on Saturdays. Well, if you're just joining us, welcome to the show. Today we've been talking about stress management and how stress can occur at any place and at any time. Too much stress can be toxic, but the right amount of stress makes us stronger. The key is to find the right balance, which can be hard to do. We want to learn to find and manage our stress sweet spot. Right before the break, we were talking about stress being good for you. There was a study done on Navy SEALs where they found that the SEALs obtained faster obstacle times with those SEALs who were able to go after and thought stress as a positive versus those who thought it was a negative. We also know that too much stress can cause physical harm. In this segment, we're talking about chronic stress. I've got an article here by Robert Sanders. Robert starts off by saying, "Are you overworked and stressed out? Look on the bright side." Some stress is good. He talks about the acute stress versus chronic stress, which is somewhat of a continuation of the theme of what we were talking about in the prior segment. He says, with too little stress, it can lead to boredom, depression. Too little stress can lead to boredom and depression. Too much can lead to anxiety and poor health. The right amount of acute stress, however, tunes up the brain and improves performance and health. You always think about stress as really a bad thing, but it's not, said Daniela Kuffner, Associate Professor of Biology at the University of California, Berkeley. Some amounts of stress are good to push you, to get you to the next level of optimal alertness, behavioral, and cognitive performance. New research by Koffner and UC Berkeley postdoctoral fellow Elizabeth Kirby has uncovered how acute stress, the short-lived stress, not the long-term chronic stress, can actually prime the brain for improved performance. And in studies on rats, they found that significant but brief stressful events caused stem cells in their brains to proliferate into new cells that would mature 2 weeks later, improve the rat's mental performance. I think intermittent stressful events are probably what keeps the brain more alert, and you perform better when you're alert, she said. Koffner, Kirby, and colleagues in the UC Berkeley's Helen Willis Neuroscience Institute described their results in a paper published April 16th in the new open access online journal, eLife. The UC Berkeley researchers' findings in general reinforce the notion that stress hormones help an animal adapt. After all, remembering the place where something stressful happened is beneficial to deal with future situations in the same place, said Bruce McEwen, head of the Harold and Margaret Millikan Hatch Laboratory of Neuroendocrinology at the Rockefeller University. Koffner is especially interested in how both acute and chronic stress affects the memory. And since the brain's hippocampus is critical to memory, she and her colleagues focused on the effects of stress on neural stem cells in the hippocampus of the adult rat brain. Neural stem cells are sort of generic and progenitor brain cells, depending on chemical triggers that can mature neurons, astrocytes, or other cells in the brain. It goes on to talk about the anatomy, physiology, and chemistry of the brains. But I think it's important for us to think about this from the perspective of there are studies out there that have looked at the effect of stress on the brain. There are studies out there that show how small amounts of stress that is acute, meaning that it's short term, can help to stimulate our brain. And what we want to do as we think about our personal development and ways to be able to manage this, right? We're not rats in a laboratory. We are human beings. And so we want to think about this from the perspective of there's this short-term stress that we should be seeking. We should look for it because that short-term stress is going to help our brains grow. They're going to give us experiences in dealing with stressors in certain situations. And the more you are able to deal with a stressful situation, and then you recover from it, deal with it, recover from it, deal with it, recover from it, that is what's going to give you the experience and the confidence to be able to, next time you see that situation, be able to approach it with confidence, know that you're able to do this, and over time, it's not going to be as stressful to you. Over time, you're going to, because of the experiences, be able to step up, accomplish what you need to accomplish. The hard part is when we have all of these other chronic stressors in our lives. These are the long-term stressors. If you're dealing with pain, low back pain, leg pain, arm pain, or you're dealing with some other type of emotional trauma, if you're dealing with cognitive issues, those are all going to impact your ability to handle any stressors. So the key is to understand what are those chronic stressors in our lives? What are those things that we need to identify? Once we've identified them, we have to take action. We have to go out and try and find solutions. And it might not be that you need a coach. You might need professional help. And knowing when it's okay to get that professional help is part of the growth that we need to do to be able to develop as a person, to be able to focus on what we want to accomplish. And so when we get to a point where these stressors are manageable, we can then start to inject strategically stressful situations based on those development areas we want to grow in, give ourselves some time to recover, and then we're going to go back and do it again. And in doing so, you're going to find that over time, you aren't going to get as stressed about those things that you want to focus on, and you're going to be able to do them much more confidently. You're listening to My Strategy. I'm your host, John M. Hawkins, coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. When we come back, we're going to talk about Finding the stress sweet spot. We'll be right back. Hello and welcome back, everyone. I'm John M. Hawkins. The show is called My Strategy. If you're just joining us, welcome. Right before the break, we were talking about the key to stress management, handling the acute stress versus chronic stress. In this segment, I want to talk about finding your stress sweet spot. What is your stress sweet spot? Got an article here. Talks about finding the stress sweet spot. Now, this is a continuation of a prior article that I was referring to. I believe it was in segment 2. For each specific performance, each person has a certain right amount of energy they require from the stress response system that enables them to perform at their best. This is often known as your individual zone of optimal functioning. The IZOF. With too little stress, you won't be engaged enough. But if you have too much stress, you might lose focus and control, and you'll break down. This right amount of energy is different for each person and each task. For example, an impending deadline on a work project, your child having trouble with other kids at school, a car accident, or a passionate kiss with your spouse will all activate your stress response systems. But each require a different level of energy, focus, and emotion for you to be at your best. What allows you to perform at your best while giving a brief won't be the same as what enables your battle buddy to do the same task. All right. So we've talked a lot about the technical aspects and the physiological aspects. In this segment, we're going to talk a little bit about strategy. So they've laid out some strategies here. Help yourself stay in your stress sweet spot by using these 3 steps to help you have the right amount of energy to perform at your best. So the 3 things are, 1, name your stress. This helps you break out the primitive reactive part of your brain and helps you use the part that helps you plan and reflect. So name the stress. Number 2, once we've named the stress, we want to embrace the stress. You're experiencing stress because something you care about is in play, and your body is trying to give you the energy needed to live it out. So we've named it, we've embraced it. Now we need to channel it. Use your energy your body is providing to intentionally improve your performance for the task at hand. What's the best way to use your energy to help activate that goal or value? What do you need to do, feel, or focus on? Name the stress, embrace, and channel. How many people think about that when a stressor comes along? You know, sometimes you just think, I don't like this stress. I don't think stress is good. I want to get away from it. But if you get away from it, it could potentially limit your growth. So I like this strategy. It's pretty simple. Name, embrace, and channel. What do you need to say to yourself to help you get there? When should I pump the brakes on stress? Stress can help you perform at your best, but at times you might have too much energy for the current task. Or your stress response might seem to have been activated for too long, wearing you down. Luckily, your body has another natural mechanism. The relaxation response works in tandem with your stress response to help you get to the right level of stress to perform. Relaxation response helps reduce your heart rate, breathing, metabolic rates, as well as blood pressure and muscle tension. It can also increase your feeling of positive mood and calm, decrease inflammation, and activate your relaxation response. Now, here's something that's interesting, because while there are relaxation responses out there, I have a hard time relaxing sometimes. And so one of the things that I've integrated into my daily life is exercise. So I can get my heart rate up, my breathing, my metabolic rates, and then my body naturally can't continue exercising. And so there's this natural relaxation. So I would say that one of those things that we need to be doing on a daily basis or a few times a week is exercise. That can help you deal with stresses. Now, it's not going to, help you focus on which stresses you should be including in your life, but it is going to help the body to get stressed out in a physical way and then relax. The article goes on to talk about some other triggers. Notice what your triggers are. And if you have the stress is bad mindset, we want to adjust that to stress is good, but which stresses do we want to focus on? If you believe stress is bad for you, then it makes sense to want to avoid stress at all costs. That will likely lead you to escape the stressor with some other activity. These are important to watch out for. So if you find yourself doing other activities like eating when not hungry, escaping with social media, binge watching, shopping, drinking, gambling, smoking, playing games, these activities release dopamine, which provide a short-term experience of escape and feeling good, but will leave you unsatisfied and wanting more. Therefore, you often don't feel energized or refreshed when engaging in them. They can leave you feeling more stressed because whatever stressor was that you were escaping is still there. Fighting the stressor. If you believe stress is bad for you, then it will make sense to get angry at whatever is bringing you additional stress. Unfortunately, it's usually the things that you care most about that bring you stress. I also talk about distancing yourselves from others and more. Bottom line is, stress can be good for you if you believe it's good for you. But developing a new belief takes time and effort. Each day, try to find a time in your normal routine to remind yourself that you will experience stress today, and that stress will help you perform and grow at the things that mean the most to you. You're listening to My Strategy. John Hawkins here. When we come back, we're going to help you put your plan in place. I'll be right back. Hello and welcome back, everyone. I'm John M. Hawkins. The show is called My Strategy. We're coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. Well, in case you missed this broadcast, you can listen on iHeartRadio, Apple iTunes, or many of the other digital podcast platforms. If you'd like to have something covered on the show, send an email to talk@johnmhawkins.com. That's talk@johnmhawkins.com, or call us at 1-844-MY-STRATEGY. That's 844-MY-STRATEGY. In this episode, we've been talking about stress management and how stress can occur at any place and any time. In fact, stress affects all of us. Many of us see stress as negative, but there are some benefits to stress. At the end of the day, what does stress mean? It's our body's reaction to harmful situations, whether they're perceived to be real or imaginary, our fight or flight response. Symptoms of stress can impact our emotions, behaviors, ability to think, and much more. Too much stress is toxic. Early experiences of trauma can disrupt our brain's ability to process stress and impacting the stress response. Our brain's alarm system, verbal memory, and CEO of the brain all end up being impaired. But is stress, or could it be good for us? A stress is helpful mindset might actually be very good for you. There was a study done with 174 Navy SEALs when they found that stress helped the SEALs obtain faster obstacle times, higher rated than their peers and leaders. They lasted in the program longer than those who believed stress was harmful. But really, one of the keys to stress is identifying the chronic stressors in our lives and know that too little stresses can lead to boredom and depression. So it's a balance between not enough stress, being bored and depressed. On the other end of the spectrum, you have these chronic stressors that can be debilitating. There was a study on rats that showed that their stem cells, that rats that had a little bit of stimulus, that their stem cells over the next few days didn't help them much, but over a week, they grew, and it increased their mental performance. I think it all comes down to finding our stress sweet spot. Each person has the right amount of energy they require from stress that enables them to perform at their optimal. Stress strategies: find your sweet spot, name the stress, embrace the stress, channel the stress. Know your triggers. Fleeing the sensor, fighting the sensor, distancing yourself. But it all comes down to being able to identify the habits and patterns that we have in our lives, knowing when to consciously prioritize those habits and patterns that all must align to our goals, and ultimately find clarity. And in finding clarity, it might be helpful to have a coach, a friend, a mentor, somebody who can help you figure out what stresses are the good stresses in your life. You might also have some chronic stressors in your life as well. Know when to seek and get help for those, and get help at all cost. Because if you do not get those acute, those long-term stresses, the chronic stresses under control, it can impact your physical, mental capabilities, which is going to keep you from accomplishing those goals and objectives that you have set for yourself. So at the end of the day, it comes down to knowing that we are going to have stress in our lives. There is going to be stress. The mindset of embracing stress and that stress is good is the better of the two mindsets to be able to grow, to know how you can use stress in a positive way. The key is that each one of us has our own way of dealing with it, and we're going to have to unlock that mystery before we can use it to our advantage. Well, that's all the show we have for today. Great to be here with you. Hope you have a good day, and we'll see you next time.